A $300 designer hoodie can leave the factory for less than $14. That gap is not paying for better cotton. It is paying for the name on the chest. Today, we are ranking 12 men's fashion labels. 6 that are quietly picking your pocket with logo tax and licensing shortcuts, and 6 that actually put your money into the cloth. So which brand tops the worst offenders list? 6. Ralph Lauren Polo. Ralph Lauren Polo opens the ranking with one of the most enduring logo taxes in men's fashion. A classic fit mesh polo from this label retails between $98 and $125, yet the underlying cotton piqué is a standard 200 grams per square meter knit sourced from the same mills that supply mid-market retailers across Peru, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. When you add labor, trims, and freight, the landed cost per unit typically lands between $8 and $11. Everything above that is carrying the embroidered pony, the wholesale margin, and a marketing budget that funds polo sponsorships, Wimbledon tie-ins, and glossy Americana campaigns. Ralph Lauren Corporation reported a gross margin above 66% in its fiscal 2025 filings, a number the company itself credits to the strength of the logo rather than any upgrade in material. The construction is perfectly competent. The cotton is fine. But the same garment without the embroidered horse would sit on a shelf at a third of the price. The result is a product that earns its premium through heritage storytelling, not through superior cloth. Ralph Lauren sets the tone for a category built on emblems. So which brand borrows the exact same playbook and charges even more for it? A German label with a bigger marketing budget and a thinner shirt. 5. Hugo Boss. Hugo Boss trades on the idea of German tailoring, but most of the product you see on the floor is built to a very different standard. A standard Hugo Boss business shirt retails for $128 to $158, while the shell fabric is a 2-ply cotton blend produced under contract in Turkey, Bulgaria, and Vietnam at a cost of roughly $4 to $6 per meter. Add the collar fusing, the labor, and the shipping, and the landed cost per shirt sits between $14 and $18. The markup is absorbed by department store margins, seasonal marketing, and the licensing arms that carry the Boss name onto fragrances, eyewear, and watches. The group's 2024 annual report shows marketing spending above €300 million, and that cost is baked directly into the retail price. What the buyer actually receives is a machine-finished shirt with fused interlinings, a detail that gives the collar a crisp look for the first dozen washes before it begins to bubble. None of the shirts at this price point use a floating canvas, a mother-of-pearl button, or a single needle side seam. You are paying for German cachet, not German construction. So what happens when a sporting heritage brand decides to sell the crocodile and stop investing in the cotton? A tennis legend's name, stitched onto a mid-market knit. 4. Lacoste. Lacoste presents the story of a sporting heritage brand absorbed almost entirely into the licensing economy. The iconic L1212 polo retails between $110 and $135, and while the brand still trades on René Lacoste's original 1933 design, the modern production sits with the Mouse Frères group across factories in Peru, Morocco, and India. The petit piqué cotton used today is a 220 grams per square meter knit that a technical buyer would classify as strong mid-market, not luxury. Landed cost per polo works out to roughly $9 to $12, which leaves a markup of around 10 times at full retail. Footwear, eyewear, and fragrance revenue sit under separate licensing contracts that funnel royalties back to the trademark holder rather than into garment development. The crack embroidery is still hand-stitched onto the chest in most cases, and the color library is broader than almost any competitor, but neither of these details justifies the spread between cost and price. The buyer is paying for a reptile and a tennis legend who retired from the sport nearly 100 years ago. There is no in-house textile research and no factory ownership driving the premium. The crack earns more than the cutter ever will. So what is left of a brand when the original designer, the atelier, and the factories have all walked away? A trademark without a house behind it. 3. Ted Baker. Ted Baker sits on shaky ground in the ranking, not just because of markup but because of how little of the original house remains. After the 2024 collapse of its North American operations and the UK business entering administration, the trademark is now controlled by Authentic Brands Group, a licensing holding company that also owns Reebok, Forever 21, and Brooks Brothers. A Ted Baker dress shirt still retails for $135 to $175, yet production has been consolidated under third-party licensees operating out of China, Bangladesh, and India at a landed cost of around $13 per unit. The brand's signature finishes, such as the contrast inner cuff and the floral print lining, remain on the tag, but the fabric has quietly shifted toward lighter polycotton blends in the $3 per meter range. There is no central atelier driving cohesion. There is no house tailor refining the block. The pattern is licensed, the fabric is sourced to a cost target, and the product is pushed to whichever retailer will carry it. Authentic Brands Group collects the royalty and moves on. The premium is pure nostalgia, and the nostalgia gets thinner with every season the licensees cut further costs from the build. So which brand charges even more for a logo on a back pocket? A horseshoe stitch doing the heavy lifting. 2. True Religion. True Religion built an empire on a horseshoe logo stitched onto the back pocket, and that logo is still doing most of the heavy lifting. A standard pair of Ricky straight-leg jeans retails between $150 and $220, yet the denim itself is an 11 to 12 ounce cotton elastane weave sourced from mills in Mexico, Egypt, and Bangladesh at a cost of roughly $4 to $5 per meter. Landed cost per pair, including the hardware, the thick contrast stitching, and the labor, falls between $18 and $24. The remainder of the sticker price is absorbed by retail markup, licensing agreements across Asia and the Middle East, and a marketing budget that has leaned heavily on celebrity visibility since the brand's second restructuring in 2020. The denim is honestly not bad. The rivets are solid. The construction will survive regular wear. But the gap between what the jeans cost to produce and what the shopper hands over is one of the widest in the category. The brand is now owned by SB360 Capital and ACON Investments, holding groups that monetize the name rather than invest in new weaves. You are paying for a stitch pattern and a memory of the mid-2000s. So which label takes this formula and sells an even bigger story at an even bigger price? An Italian address and a runway budget wrapped around standard denim. 1. Diesel. Diesel closes the villain half by perfecting the art of premium price for mid-tier output. A signature 1995 straight-leg jean from Diesel retails between $248 and $298, while the denim itself is a standard 11-ounce ring-spun cotton sourced from Italian and Turkish mills at around $6 per meter. Full landed cost, including the distressed treatments, the washes, and the hardware, sits between $22 and $28 per pair. The rest of the price covers the OTB Group's retail footprint, licensing royalties to third-party producers, and a marketing spend that has historically leaned into provocative campaigns and flagship stores in expensive postcodes. Diesel's official 2024 figures show a gross margin near 58%, driven almost entirely by the denim and fragrance lines. The washes are genuinely distinctive. The cuts are confident. But the underlying cloth is the same weight and weave class as jeans selling for a third of the price on the same block. There is no selvage mill signature, no proprietary loom, no deadstock sourcing that would justify the premium. What the buyer is really paying for is the runway theatre and the Milanese address. You are paying for the story of the jean, not the jean. That closes the villain list. So which brands actually earn the money you hand them, and what does honest pricing look like in practice? The tone shifts. A California workshop that shows its homework. 6. Tailor Stitch. Tailor Stitch opens the honest half with a direct-to-consumer model built on workshop transparency. Every new fabric is introduced through a campaign page that lists the mill, the country of origin, the weight in ounces, and the exact blend before a single unit is cut. The brand's signature jack shirt, made from a 10-ounce organic cotton twill woven in Japan and cut and sewn in California or Portugal, retails between $128 and $158. The typical markup lands around 2.5 to 3 times the landed cost, a ratio that reflects real labor inputs and verified material rather than a heritage storytelling premium. Customers can see exactly which dye house treated the fabric and which factory handled construction. Restocks are run as pre-orders, which reduces waste and keeps prices closer to actual cost. The fit is cut for a working body rather than a runway silhouette, and the seams are triple-stitched at stress points. What the shopper pays for is the cloth, the cutter, and the pattern work. There is no fragrance royalty, no celebrity campaign, no warehouse of unsold stock inflating the margin. The brand publishes a full impact report each year showing fabric composition, factory conditions, and waste figures across its catalog. So which brand applies the same transparency to the far more complicated world of tailoring? A Toronto operation quietly undercutting the entire suit industry. 5. Spire & Mackay. Spire & Mackay runs one of the quietest value plays in men's tailoring, operating direct-to-consumer out of Toronto and avoiding wholesale entirely. A half-canvas wool suit from this label retails between $498 and $648, a figure that would land at $1,200 or more under a conventional department store markup. The wool is sourced from Italian mills including Vittorio Barbari's Canonico and Reda, and the jackets are built with a genuine floating chest piece rather than the glued fusing found in most same-priced competitors. Each product page lists the mill name, the fabric weight, and the construction type, giving the buyer a factual basis for the price rather than a vague claim of quality. The typical markup sits near 2.5 times the landed cost, which is almost unheard of in tailoring. Alteration allowances are generous, and the house block is available in slim and contemporary cuts without a customization fee. The trade-off is a leaner retail experience and longer lead times on certain fabrics, but the buyer who cares about what the jacket is made of walks away with significantly more cloth and construction per dollar than almost any peer. The brand also offers a bespoke service that produces genuinely full canvas jackets at roughly a third of what a European equivalent would charge. So what does this kind of honesty look like in a fully Italian supply chain? A London-based label that names every mill it uses. 4. Luca Faloni. Luca Faloni has built its reputation on a narrow promise that it actually keeps. Every product is made in Italy, every fabric is sourced from a named Italian mill, and every product page lists the region of production and the fiber detail before the buyer reaches checkout. A signature Portofino linen shirt retails between $195 and $225, woven from long staple European flax at a Como area mill and cut and sewn in Naples or Puglia. The markup on this product sits around 2.5 to 3 times the landed cost, which is tight for a fully Italian garment. The brand operates primarily online with a small number of showrooms in London, Milan, and Zurich, avoiding the wholesale layer that typically doubles the price of Italian-made clothing at a department store. There are no licensed fragrances, no logo patches, no runway budget, and no third-party production. The cashmere is two-ply from Cariaggi, the cotton is long staple from the Veneto, and the linen is certified European. The buttons are Australian mother of pearl, not plastic pressed to look like it. What the buyer receives is a garment that would retail for $400 under a traditional distribution model, delivered at roughly half that price because the brand refuses to play the licensing game. So can this same transparency work in a fully domestic American supply chain? A Los Angeles brand that owns its own factory floor. 3. Buck Mason. Buck Mason approaches the market with a California workwear sensibility and a supply chain short enough to explain on a single page. The brand's flagship slub cotton curved hem tee retails between $38 and $48, woven in the United States from long staple cotton at a North Carolina mill and cut and sewn at a Los Angeles facility the founders have operated since 2013. Landed cost per tee sits between $12 and $15, and the markup lands near 3 times, which is exceptionally low for a fully domestic garment. There is no wholesale inflation because 90% of sales run through the brand's own stores and website. The heavier goods in the catalog, including the Rambler Oxford and the Japanese selvage denim, are produced with the same transparency. Each product page lists mill origin, weight, and construction details without the marketing softening that most brands apply. The fit block favors a longer torso and a lean through the chest, a decision the brand makes openly rather than hiding behind generic sizing labels. The selvage denim program uses Kaihara and Kuroki mill cloth on specific runs, disclosed openly in the product description. What the buyer pays for is American cloth, American labor, and a cut that has been refined over more than a decade. No celebrity campaign, no licensing dilution, no logo tax. So which brand takes transparency one step further and publishes the actual cost breakdown? A Brooklyn label that prints the labor percentage on the page. 2. Kirin Finch. Kirin Finch has quietly become one of the most rigorously transparent menswear brands in the market by refusing almost every shortcut the category relies on. The brand lists the exact mill, the country of origin, the fabric weight, and the cost breakdown for every garment on its website, including labor percentages and freight. A Kirin Finch button-down in a 2-ply cotton poplin retails between $148 and $178, woven at a mill in Portugal and sewn at a fair wear certified factory in the same region. The landed cost sits near $46 per shirt, giving a markup of roughly 3 times rather than the 8 to 10 times common in the mid-market. The pattern work is cut specifically for a broader shoulder and a tapered waist rather than a generic trim block, and the construction uses single needle stitching at the sleeve placket and collar. There are no licensed sub-brands, no fragrance royalties, and no wholesale distribution inflating the sticker. Deadstock buttons are sourced from European suppliers and listed by supplier name on every product page. What the shopper is paying for is Portuguese cloth, fair wear certified labor, and a cut engineered for a specific body rather than a mannequin. The pricing makes sense on paper, which is something the majority of the category cannot claim. So which brand takes every principle Kirin Finch refuses to compromise and adds made to measure on top? The top of the list, where every layer of the markup has been stripped out. 1. Proper Cloth. Proper Cloth takes the top spot by building the most complete case for honest pricing in the men's shirting category. Every shirt begins with a fit algorithm that converts body measurements into a bespoke pattern tailored to the individual buyer, replacing the generic sizing block that forces most men into a compromise. The construction is single needle throughout the body, collar, and cuff, a detail that gives cleaner seams and better longevity than the double needle method used in most off-the-rack shirts. Fabric selection is exhaustive and fully disclosed. Each option on the site lists the mill name, the country of origin, the weave, the thread count, and the weight before the buyer commits. Prices range from $95 to $185 depending on cloth, and the markup sits at roughly 2 to 3 times the landed cost, which is low for made-to-measure work. The shirts are constructed in a proper cloth-owned facility, avoiding the licensing layer that inflates prices across the category. There are no logos on the exterior, no fragrance royalties funding the margin, no wholesale chain to feed. Every order is backed by a perfect fit guarantee that will remake the pattern at no cost if the first version does not hang correctly. What the buyer receives is a garment cut to their exact body, built from a fabric they selected with full specifications, at a price that reflects the cloth and the labor rather than a branding tax. This is what honest pricing looks like when every layer of the industry's usual markup is stripped away. So, across all 12 brands, one pattern holds. Price rarely reflects quality. It reflects how much of the bill is spent on the garment versus how much is spent on the name. In men's fashion, the tag is often telling you about the marketing department, not the mill. Value is not about prestige. It is about what you can verify. Choose the cloth. Trust the stitching. Dress for yourself.